Those who think that we were either slow on our response or lacked urgency don't know the facts. This has been our highest priority since this crisis occurred. So this notion that somehow the federal government is sitting on the sidelines and for the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks we've just been letting BP make a whole bunch of decisions is simply not true. What is true is that when it comes to stopping the leak down below, the federal government does not possess superior technology to BP. If BP wasn't doing what our best options were, we were fully empowered to instruct them to tell them to do something different.
Well, that was President Obama before the latest bad news from the Gulf, when British Petroleum, they still call themselves Beyond Petroleum, I think, declared that their top kill effort to plug the gushing geyser a mile down in the Gulf of Mexico had failed. The president there said that those who think the government's response hasn't been urgent enough just simply have it wrong. Has the U.S. been allowing BP to make the decisions? Wrong there, too. If you are thinking that there is some technology that the government has that BP doesn't, that's also a mistake, said President Obama. Our next guest is somebody who, if you haven't been following her reports from the Gulf, you should. She's the human rights reporter for Mother Jones, a former New Orleans resident who has been on the ground every day and I suspect has a few things to say about the president's approach to this whole crisis. Mac McClelland, welcome to GRITtv.
Thanks for having me.
So he says there may be those who think there hasn't been urgency. Talk about those you are meeting with now on the streets.
Those who think that it hasn't been enough urgency is pretty much everybody who I've talked to. People are, of course, incredibly frustrated with the amount of time that has passed, with the amount of information that seems to be missing, with the fact that BP seems to be spreading misinformation and that the White House doesn't seem to be doing anything to hold them accountable for that lack of information that it's giving to the residents down here. So people are, BP is obviously the biggest villain, but of course people are also incredibly disappointed with Obama's response.
Well, let's talk about controlling message. Our whole show, I think, is about truth and consequences today and how the truth is or isn't getting out. You've been on the ground, on the beaches, trying to do reporting. What are you up against?
I'm up against the BP PR machine, as well as the sheriff's department of several parishes down here in Louisiana, which are aiding BP in keeping press off of the beaches via deputies' blockades. So it took me several days just to get onto one island, even though, I'm credentialed press, to see what's going on there, because everyone had said that it was, really awful. But all the sheriffs were telling us that you can't get through to that island unless you have both the permission of BP and also a BP escort who has to follow you around the entire time that you're there.
So wait a minute, you are there with your Mother Jones press pass, a camera presumably, notepads, whatever else. They're saying you have to have a BP accompaniment?
Correct. Well, they told us the person that you have to talk to is this BP liaison, and the only person who was able to get us access was this BP liaison. And when I was arguing with them, saying, this is a public beach, obviously. This is Elmer's Island Wildlife Refuge, which just has a road going down to it that, technically anyone should be able to use. That's where they have the blockade set up. They said that we had to talk to this BP liaison, who I was asking, this is public land, and they were saying, well, yeah, but it's BP's oil, which is why we are controlling the access to.
People are very angry, and there were demonstrations in the streets of New Orleans this weekend. Here is Dr. Johns. You may know him from the HBO show Treme, local musician, speaking out very strongly about what he believes BP is telling and not telling. Take a look.
Killing 11 people is a crime, and why they're still in charge of the crime site. I'm upset because BP Oil knew since March that the shutoff valves weren't working and the rubber was disintegrating around this. And I find that, of course, they're a big corporation, and all they kept telling all of the people working on it was keep drilling.
That was just one of the voices. There are many. We'll have more at our website, GRITtv.org. Mac, back to you. Dr. Johns there is referring in part to documents that have been coming out from BP, kind of leaked to the press, revealing that, yes, indeed, they knew there was a problem with that pressure valve. They weren't completely forthright with the Minerals Management Service. They tested their power valve under less pressure than it was going to be under in the water itself. Who are you at this point holding responsible for information and failure to tell and failure to check?
The disinformation campaign and the cover-up on behalf of BP is, of course, incredibly alarming, but obviously they're not the only persons who are responsible. Our government is the body that allowed them to have this total lack of oversight and regulation. But in terms of the is anybody even surprised anymore that BP was covering up, that BP was cutting corners? It's consistent with their total lack of transparency now. Everyone that I talk to on the shores here in Louisiana, even local authorities, important local authorities like the fire chief and the sheriff's department, are saying that BP is even lying to them. Still now, when oil started washing up here in Grand Isle about 2 weeks ago, BP was telling the local authorities that it wasn't even oil. They were saying that it was red tide, it was a natural algae bloom, maybe it was mud. So which is completely ludicrous. Of course, everyone knows there's this oil spill, but they're even denying that.
And now they're telling the people that worked on the dispersant crews that there are sicknesses that many of the fisher people have documented isn't caused by the dispersant that's banned in Europe, but rather by, well, maybe food poisoning.
Right, that it's food poisoning, even though it's known that these chemical dispersants, if you are exposed to them for long periods of time, can actually rupture your red blood cells. So there's also, what about the people who are just walking around on the island and on the beach? Should they be wearing respirators? BP is pretending like everything is totally fine, and, nobody really knows.
What do you make, and what are the people you're talking to make of the latest word, which is that we're going to be waiting till August to see any of these relief wells actually function?
People are outraged, of course, and they are starting to consider whether or not it's going to be possible for them to continue living where they live. I was talking to a bartender at a bar on Grand Isle, which is a huge tourist destination, who has been there. She went to high school there. She's lived there for 20 years, and she was saying, maybe we're all going to have to move to Baton Rouge. Maybe we're all going to have to evacuate this island because it's not going to be livable anymore. So people are, in addition to being mad, they're just, it's the same sort of thing that we experienced during Katrina. I lived here during Katrina, and the total lack of information about your future and what could possibly happen is probably the most upsetting part.
Do you think it's a human rights crime what's going on there?
Absolutely. These people are going to be getting sick. These people are going to continue getting sick. Their BP is also preventing these workers from wearing respirators, even if they have their own and even if they want to. And their livelihoods are going to be destroyed. BP is going to give them some quick and easy payouts, and they're going to sign things that say that they can't sue them anymore down the line. Their livelihoods are going to be totally lost. They're going to be uprooted. Absolutely. The human impact is just staggering.
Mac McClelland, thank you so much. For Mother Jones, we'll link to Mac's articles and tweets at our website, GRITtv.org. Check it out.